Hey guys, welcome to Lenin 8. In this video, we are going to discuss a Java program to print the second biggest element of an array. For example, if the input is of 11 minus 12, 4, 51, 40, 99, 19, means some negative and some positive elements. So in this, what is the second biggest? So 99 is the first biggest or the highest element. Then 51 is the second biggest. Therefore, our output should be 51 for this input of array. What if the elements are repeated, even the biggest element and also the second biggest elements? For example, 91 and 91 is the highest element which is repeated. And then 40 and 40 is also repeated along with some other positive numbers, some other negative numbers. So in this scenario also, which is second biggest? So 91, 91, both it's the first biggest. Then 40 should be the second biggest. So 40 should be our output. So I recommend you to pause the video and try your own logic. Let us discuss how do we get this second biggest element of the array. So for this, so previously we might have known about how do we print biggest element of the array. So for the same thing with a slight modification or with one extra condition, we can achieve this result. So for this, assume I'm writing my code inside a main method. So I'm taking one integer array with some array name arr equals some array elements. So randomly I'm taking not the exact numbers which is presented in the slide. So 10, some minus 1, 20, some 50, some 3, some minus 50, some 45. Some elements randomly have taken. So for this, how do we get the biggest element of the array logic? So for this, so we need one reference variable, say int first biggest, because we want to find second biggest also. I'm using a variable with the name first biggest equals. So I'll tell you what to consider and why to consider also. For time being, I'm leaving empty. So since we have to find the second biggest also, so one more variable, so int second biggest is also some reference we have to consider. So what to consider, we'll discuss. Then followed by, once if we have these two reference variables, then what is the corresponding logical part? To check each and every array element, so we need one for loop, and that for loop has to start from 0, and that should be less than or equals to generic logic is array name dot length. So if you are writing only less than, then -1 is not required, because here I am using equal symbol, then -1 is also required to consider each and every element of the array. Then incrementation I plus plus. So inside this for loop, what is the biggest element of the logic? So we will be using one if condition. If the array element arr of I is the way to access the array elements. So if arr of I is greater than, so first biggest, or simply biggest if you are finding biggest element of the array. So if this is the condition, then what we supposed to do? So that array element, we supposed to store it back to that biggest. So in this example, first biggest. And then finally, outside the for loop, so we are going to print this first biggest element. So if the same thing will be iterated, and finally in first biggest, we'll be having a biggest element of the array. So now here it is. The extra part which we should add is the same first biggest value we supposed to assign back to second biggest. The variables are already declared. So I'm just using the assignment operator here to assign first biggest value to second biggest. This is one additional change. Yeah. So with this, do we get, if you print the first biggest and second biggest, do we get the corresponding outputs? Yes, we will get with this logic, provided if it's only positive. If the array elements are positive, this will work to get the second biggest. But to work in every scenario, or to make it as a complete generic logic, so we have to check one more, and that is also easiest condition only. So what is that extra condition is, when it will become second biggest, so it should be less than the first biggest and greater than the second biggest element. So that is also one more condition we should add. So that's why I'm adding. If the array element ARR of I is less than first biggest. Along with this logical AND operator, if the array element is greater than second biggest. It means there is one more element which is less than first but which is greater than second biggest. Then in this scenario, that element is going to become second biggest, right? That's why inside this if condition body, so what we supposed to write? The same thing, the same array element ARR of I, we supposed to assign back to second biggest again. Yeah, like I said, with this part, it will work for only few scenarios, but along with this extra condition, this will work for every scenario of array elements. Then finally, in which variable the result is there? So closing of the for loop and inside the main method only. So I'm using one print statement to print second biggest as a variable. So this is the complete generic logic of printing second biggest of any given integer array. I hope you understood. Let us also execute this through IDE. One more important point. So here, what we should assign to this first biggest and second biggest, correct? So here, so since it should work for both positive and negative elements of the array, so we have to consider the lowest value of integer as a reference value for first biggest and also second biggest. So that is by using this integer as a predefined wrapper class dot min all capital underscore value all capital semicolon. So this is the minimum value of integer, so which we are assigning to corresponding reference variable as first biggest. Similarly for second biggest also it's exactly the same, integer dot min underscore value. So therefore there is no further less value this one. So what are the elements that we take, definitely will be more than this. So this is the complete generic logic of corresponding second biggest element of the array. So if you just remove the second biggest part from here and also from this part and from this condition, then the same logic will give the biggest element of the array or first biggest element of the array. Let us execute this. For the execution of same program, so I have taken one class with the main method, and inside this I have taken one array with some elements, and first biggest with reference values integer dot min value, and second biggest also integer dot min value. So inside this one for loop, so which is running from 0, that means first index element of the array till the last element of the array, then incremented by each time 1. Then inside this first one if condition, so if the corresponding array element is greater than first biggest, then what we supposed to do? So that array element we supposed to assign to first biggest. It's the normal biggest element of array logic. So inside this, the extra part which we should add and also should add before, not after. That is first biggest element. So we are going to assign to second biggest. Then followed by for every scenario to work, that is for both positive and also negative elements. So we are adding one more condition. If the array element is less than first biggest and if the array element is greater than second biggest, in this scenario, there is one more biggest element which is smaller than first biggest and which is bigger than the existing second biggest. So in that scenario, again, the same array element will be assigned back to second biggest. Finally, outside the for loop, so here I am using a print statement to print the second biggest element. So let us execute this program to cross verify. So for these elements, so 99 is the first biggest, 51 should be the second biggest as output. So let me execute. So we are getting the correct output. At the same time, so let me add some more elements where I'm going to repeat the first biggest and also I'm going to repeat the second biggest as well. So in this scenario, both 99, 99 are the first biggest elements. Then 51 and 51 are the second biggest. Therefore, the output should be 51. So let me save this program and execute from here. it's 51. So I'm making one more last one. So wantedly I'm adding one more element as biggest element of all. So 100. So now what is second biggest? 99 should be the output. Let us execute by saving this program, and which is giving the output as 99. So this is a generic logic which works to print the second biggest of every array element. I hope you understood. And for me to make more videos, please post your questions through comment section. Thank you and see you in the next video.